Hi everyone. So this week we're talking about the lands of the Nile. This includes Egypt, Nubia, and Ethiopia. And just as I explained in my video last week, I provide you with a PowerPoint that I go through in these videos. It corresponds to the notes I have up. And then sometimes I have supplemental videos in the PowerPoints. So here's an example. You have a link. So if you want to open up that PowerPoint, you can always access those links. All right, so last week we were talking about the Berber culture, if you remember. And one thing we looked at was how in the Berber culture, they have these deities, goddesses, gods, that will have the human body with the animal head. And this was one of the examples I gave you. Here we have a jackal head, a human body, right? And I made a comparison to Egyptian art, where we have an example of Horus, who has a human body and the falcon head. And what this shows is that these two cultures definitely had connection to one another. It could have been simply through trade, or it could have been something much more complex. We are really not 100% sure. So again, we're talking about Egypt, Nubia, Ethiopia. And Nubia and Ethiopia, when you look at the map of Africa, are right below Egypt. But that might be the case, but we actually say it kind of in reverse when we talk about Egypt because of the river Nile. The Nile River is the longest river in the world. And it's very unique because if you think like in the United States, we have the Mississippi, right? That's our biggest river. And it starts in the north and it flows south into the Gulf of Mexico, right? The Nile River is very unique, and it is one of very few rivers in the world that flows from the south to the north. The majority of the rivers in the world flow from the north to the south. This is because the Nile River originates up in the mountains here and then flows down into the Mediterranean Sea. And when you were watching the video last week, you saw the Atlas Mountains, you saw there's snow on the mountains, the high elevations. And so this is the same for these mountains, that we have elevations that are high enough that it snows. And every year in the springtime, the snow melts, the water comes, into the river, flows into the river, and goes down into the Nile. And it originates in two sections up here. One is the White Nile, the other is the Blue Nile. And because of the flow of the river, we actually call this the upper part. This is Upper Nubia. And then we have down here Lower Nubia, and the same for Egypt. We have Upper Egypt, Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt. So just make sure you're gonna get that, wrap your brain around that. The other thing about the Nile River is that it has sections that have rapids in them that are very hard to navigate. And these are called cataracts. Like you have a cataract on your eye, a cataract. And because of these cataracts, parts of the river were separated for long periods of time. And we'll see it takes them a couple thousand years to kind of form into bigger empires because of this. What would happen also when we have the melting here of the snow and it comes down the Nile River, you would have flooding along the banks of the river, and it would leave this very dark black silt that had a lot of minerals in it, and it was very good for farming. And the people that lived along the river, they called this land Kemt, meaning the black land, because of the color of the ground. It's not until later on, that we have the name Egypt, which I'll show you in a second here. Here I have just some close-up here so you can see in Ethiopia, actually, we have the Blue Nile that originates. And then up here, we have the White Nile that originates. And just some more information, we'll be looking at the Egyptian Empire, but then also the Kush Empire. As I was saying, before that, we have our name Kemt, but the name Egypt actually originates from Greece, from ancient Greek. And we have the Greeks come in and conquer the Egyptian Empire, the Romans, and a number of other groups of people. And here I'm showing you one of our earliest pieces of art that we have from ancient Egypt. And at this point, this is called the pre-dynastic period. So this is way before we have like the pharaohs and the dynasties and stuff. At this point, we have just very small communities along the river. They're herding animals, they're farming, and they probably have some trade routes set up along the Nile, but nothing like what we think of when we think of, you know, the pyramids and that kind of stuff. No civilization like that yet. So when we look at the date here, if you watch the video I had up last week, the C stands for what? Do you remember? Circa. It's Latin for approximate. So this is so old, we don't know the exact date of it. So we say it's 3,650 to 3,300 BC. That's really old. And if you remember what I was just showing you and what we talked about last week with the Berbers, we will often have these depictions of the human body with the animal head. That is what we have here. And so we can assume that this is some kind of female deity or goddess, right? This is actually here in New York. This is at the Brooklyn Museum, and it is the oldest thing that the museum owns. We know this is a female figure because she has breasts and wider hips. We see that there's a color change, so as though she looks like she's wearing some kind of skirt. And then the head is an animal head. Can you make out what it might be? It's supposed to be a bird. So it has the beak of a bird. And so she has the beak of a bird, the body of a human female, and then a lot of people think these are supposed to be wings. But in fact, we think that they're supposed to be horns because this group of people were herding cattle. So this was some kind of reference to the cattle they were herding, you know, like an ox or something like that, some kind of cattle like that had these horns. So she's actually three things. She's a bird, she's cattle, and she's human, all put together. And this is really quite sophisticated for this time period because, again, this thing never existed. This didn't walk around on the earth and they're just copying it. They're making this up in their head, right? So this is what we call symbolic thinking. It's a very high level of thinking for this time period.